Welcome back, everybody. We're ready to rock another week on the NBA show here on Clubhouse TV, presented, as always, by sportsbet.io. I'm Ben Wilson, my guy Chris Farley, who is having himself quite the heater, not only in this great NBA we love to bet on, but also the National Football League. You might have heard of that. So, Chris, you are you're drowning in it right now, man. With the success comes lots of expectations and attention. So you're hanging in there, and we're just trying to chug along on this show, man. 2-1 last week. 17-6 for the season. You're up a little over 9 units if you're blindly tailing us on a unit every bet. And it was another good one for us, Chris. 2-1. Just to keep trying to ground out those winning weeks, right?
Yeah, I don't know what's better. Lately, my record's in the NFL, but 17-6 in the NBA is in the early NBA. Ben, this is a great matrimony we have going on here, obviously, because that's a crazy record. I mean, now are we going to keep that up? We'll see, but what is that, like a 80% hit rate, something like that?
I'm doing the math. I'm not very good at math, but 74% we're solid.
There you go. Okay, so I'm not sure how sustainable that is, but that's, again, we speak to it a little bit every week, but I think what Ben and I are doing smartly on this show is we don't have too many bets, right? And when you are exposed to these sports books at all, you're putting your money out there. Obviously, your cash is out there. But sports books are pretty good at this, and so if you're not able to pay attention to this stuff nonstop, the less exposure, the better for most people, especially early in an NBA season. And I must say, I was talking to you about it before the week, Ben. It's been a big week for me. I'm very grateful for what happened in the circuit contest. And that's taken me off my game a little bit in the NBA. I feel like last night was a little weird. I was on Houston, I was on Memphis. I'm not sure what happened to Memphis at the end of that game either. That was weird. They ended up not covering. I had a +4 on them. So against the Kings, I think they or was Houston
Kings had
the
Kings? Game. Yeah, Kings had the game against the Rockets where Jalen Green goes down with an eye injury, and Kings end up winning by 9 and covering in that game. Yeah, so you're right. It's been kind of a whirlwind too. Also, and it was I don't know how much you did last night, but as far as the in-game stuff, because the NBA Cup, it was the final round of the group stage matches. So now we actually have the NBA Cup set, the quarterfinals, which we'll have next week. It's just kind of insane, though, right? You have no Boston, no Cleveland, arguably the two best teams in the league to start the year, and they don't even make it on the Eastern Conference side. Pretty nuts when you think about it that way. And in all honesty, I really believe that's what the NBA wanted. They wanted teams that probably are not going to be competing for titles in this thing, or at least one or two teams, and we do get that. We have the Hawks, who are probably the one team we don't really view as legit title contenders, but hey, they're in the final 8 of the Cup.
I know. Yeah, I think it worked out perfectly for the NBA, right? Because these first few months are very volatile, unpredictable. So teams that are going to disappear in April and May, they can have kind of their spot in the sun, so to speak. And we are seeing some changes to some of these teams now that showed us either really positive or negative things in the first month of the season, and now things are changing. The Golden State Warriors, Buddy Hield, out for the season. That's or he's at least. I'm sorry, I'm thinking of DeAnthony Melton. Excuse me, but Buddy Hield is just not shooting at the same success rate that he did to start the season, and we're seeing how important he is for the Golden State Warriors. All of a sudden, the Minnesota Timberwolves are having turmoil in their locker room. They're starting the exact opposite as they did last season. We're seeing guys like Dalton Knox step up
for the Lakers.
Yeah, for the LA Lakers. Jalen Wells for the Memphis Grizzlies, a surprise over there with Zach Edey. Not so much a surprise as newcomers for the Grizzlies. So you're seeing these teams still form, norm, and go through these phases, and we're still learning about who these programs are becoming. But I must say, Cleveland, Boston, and now Denver's starting to show up a little bit too. Like the elites are still there, Ben, for the most part. And there are a few teams that we can rely on. Very impressed by that win from Cleveland against Boston. Donovan Mitchell, obviously a huge fourth quarter to finish that one off. But they're sticking around. And at this point, I'm thinking we're going to see Cleveland in April and May and maybe beyond at this point.
Gotta think so. And that is our marquee matchup for the Thursday card. Unfortunately, as we record here on Wednesday afternoon, no line out yet for that game. Nuggets, Cavs. I don't know if you had that circled for any sort of play, Chris, but it is interesting how Cleveland, any single marquee matchup, we've had the 2 against Boston. They've covered both. They get the win, as you mentioned, in the rematch. Cleveland's gotten up for all these games against big-time teams. Think about the Milwaukee games, how they have really dominated in that respective divisional series. Now you get a Nuggets team off of a really emotional, high-wire, back-and-forth game. They knock off the Warriors by 4 in a really fun game to watch here. Situationally, it's definitely a lean toward Cleveland. I'm just fascinated to see, though, what this line comes out at, because Cleveland's been bet on every single game, it seems like, Chris. And with the limited depth that Denver has, kind of a tough situational angle here, going back cross-country, taking on Cleveland, who has lost just a single game at home this year. I got to think Cleveland takes money. I wonder if you wanted to get on the Cleveland side, if you'd have to pay a tax that's a little bit too heavy. We don't know yet because the line's not out, but anything you're doing there?
Neither team has a look ahead either. They both have a pretty easy test the following Saturday. The Cavaliers travel to Charlotte and the Nuggets go to D.C. That should be a blowout against the Wizards, who are still not improving at all. So yeah, this is going to be a pretty interesting game. Tougher spot, I guess, for Denver. But the thing that I'm, seeing more in Denver, reading about more about Denver, as we find out kind of we know what we're seeing on the court, but then you see some of the stats behind it. Russell Westbrook has been a pretty good addition for the Nuggets, obviously meant to sort of lead that second unit when he comes out there. But when Jokic and Murray are on the floor with Westbrook, plus 23, the Denver Nuggets are doing a good job. It seems like a very fluid, but when they're not on the floor, that mark goes way down. They're very inefficient, and that could really hurt them in this matchup. I mean, the Cavaliers, not just their starting lineup, but their bench has been great defensively too. There's not really a drop down in the kind of effort on both sides of the floor that we see from this team. And obviously this is a game that's it's at Cleveland, right? And they know that this is a former champ of just a few years ago. I would expect that the Cleveland Cavaliers are going to be a short favorite in this one. But I would say if that goes up to anything over like 4 or 5, I might look at the Nuggets there. But in this is probably going to be, for my estimation, Ben, this is like a 3 to 4 type spread. But I don't know. Cleveland's getting a lot of respect in the marketplace now, as they should. So we could see a greater line in this one. And then I'm probably just going to stay away because I'd want to support Denver, but I'm not sure if Denver is there quite yet, right? Jokic is doing his thing. Murray is shooting better. He's making more threes, but they still don't feel like they're quite there yet. That was a lot of Jokic last night, leading Denver to a win at the end, as it usually does. But it's also a lot of Golden State sort of floundering a little bit right now, or trying to figure themselves out. So I think the steam is on Cleveland. The side is Cleveland in this one, as long as it's a respectable spread.
It's been the theme, really, any of these Denver marquee games. A whole lot of Jokic. We've said that it's felt like, Chris, every single time. It's a big sort of game where Denver gets up for it. I kind of think we see this in the 5 range for Cleveland, just with the market respect. We've seen Cleveland getting basically night in, night out. And at that point, I think regardless, I would be stunned if it's not going to be sub 3, I don't think. But stay away from me. It's a game that I will be fascinated to watch, see how it plays out. Can Cleveland, will they show up again? And you get the 100% effort against another really, really good team, a title contender, this time coming from the Western Conference. As we get in, though, to our best bets, there's only a few games with lines out right now. I wonder if we're gonna be in lockstep, though, Chris. I will let you, Mr. Hot Hand, take the lead here on your first best bet. We'll see if we match here. I do have one that I like involving a couple teams in the Western Conference, so I'll let you have the floor first.
Yeah, I'll start with the Memphis Grizzlies, who mysteriously lost last night and really disappointed me against the Mavericks. But the Mavericks are playing really good basketball right now. Luka's starting to hit his stride finally, so maybe that's not too bad of a loss. They're hosting the Kings on Thursday night, and the tough part about the Kings is you don't really know what team you're going to get. Some nights they could beat, it seems like they can beat any team in the league, right? Obviously, their offense can step up. They still have a lot of the same parts. Malik Monk is back, which was obviously such a huge part of their success, especially with that bench unit coming in. But the Kings just aren't a team I trust. Defensively, they've been terrible. They're still 28th in the NBA. They're staying in the bottom third recently too. And Memphis is kind of feeling themselves right now, Ben. And Ja Morant, the energy of Ja Morant and the effect that he has in his team is hard to explain, because even when he's not scoring points or maybe significantly affecting the game, the confidence of the Memphis Grizzlies just seems to go way up. They seem to just be more gelled. Obviously, he gets so much attention on the court. And then they have these other guys stepping up, like a Jalen who's killing it from beyond the arc. Zach Edey, I don't believe is back for this game yet.
No, still down at the G League for Edie. He's been working his way back. Yes.
Looks like December 7th. Yeah, so maybe a few days later. But especially if we get a respectable line here. I mean, I have Memphis -7 in this spot, and I don't think it's going to be that strong because the market still does respect the Kings, expecting them to kind of return to form. But we just haven't seen it yet. And this is a Memphis Grizzlies team who's doing a lot of things right now on both sides of the court. And this is a young team, an energetic team who shows up every single night, which you can't really say that for a lot of teams in the NBA. So Memphis at home, especially off that loss where they were leading into the fourth quarter and kind of let that one get away from them, I expect a pretty quick response here from Memphis. And I'm seeing just a -3.5 right now at BetOnline. Sportsbet.io, I'm sure, has a great line coming up here shortly. So I'm going to take advantage of that one. I'm going to be on Memphis on Thursday.
No doubt. A bad hosting job by me. What I should have said, Chris, was I think we might be on lockstep on the same game. Is it Grizzlies -4.5? Because that was my guess. And sure enough, it is. I'm all over Memphis. I did see this as we were talking. I feel like this happens every game we discuss, Chris, where we are definitively on a side. It moves on us as we are discussing. So best number we can at least give out right now is 4.5. I got to think, though, this closes at least 5.5, if not higher. I mean, it seems like, especially these Memphis home games, where the Grizzlies have just been a unit at home. They're 9-1 their last 10 games at home. 8 of the last 9 games in that span, they have outscored their opponents and won by double digits. So you're talking about games against Denver, against Milwaukee, where they've won by margin. And what probably impresses me the most, you mentioned how good Ja Morant has been leading that team. It's not just Morant and his unbelievable ability to score from all areas of the floor. I've just been so impressed with the continuity. I feel like this year, now that you've had Morant fully healthy, there's been no off-the-court issues, which was the big storyline last year for Memphis. But the rest of the team around him, whether it's from the wings down to the post players, they have such a good concept and team continuity for where they need to be to support Morant. And it's just flowed really comfortably from one end of the floor to the other, from the perimeter down to the paint. And the first time I really got a good look at Memphis was the Milwaukee game that kicked off this great stretch of form at home for them. And they had an answer to everything the Bucks, a very, very good team, were throwing at them. And the Bucks are a team who have obviously an elite talent on the inside in Giannis Antetokounmpo, elite talent on the outside in Damian Lillard. And defensively, Memphis just had an answer for every single look. And last 10 games now, Memphis, top 5 defensive rating. They're top 10 on offense, top 10 in overall net rating as well. And this whack-a-mole Kings team that you're never really sure what you're going to get, Chris, off of a big win at home over Houston. Love the situational angle, too, now going on the road against the Memphis team who was just disappointed in a tight loss against Dallas on the road last time out. So I'm with you, man. Give me a load up on the Memphis Grizzlies here. I'll back the Fighting Taylor Jenkins. Keep that home streak going. That'll be our consensus group play here on the show.
Still a very underrated coach too, and I like what you said there, because leadership is a tough thing to handicap. Like, I don't know if we can put that in numbers, but it still matters in the NBA. We think about guys like a Kobe Bryant, obviously LeBron James, even someone like Chris Paul, the kind of professionalism he's brought to San Antonio. It's important for these teams, and Ja Morant gives his team a sense of belief that they can win these games, and obviously what he presents on the court. But it totally changes their brand and their feel, and it's working right now. I love Memphis. I love Ja Morant. I have an early bet on him as the MVP with very good odds. I got to pull that up before the end of the show and see if I can find them. But they're just a fun team to watch. And so is there a little bias in there? Well, maybe. But this is also a very humble line on the Grizzlies against a team that really can't find itself.
It should be also known, this is a very small sample size, Chris, but lifetime, we are 1-0 when we have a joint best bet on this show. So, I mean, that's a 1,000 winning percentage right there. We had Nets over Knicks a couple weeks ago, catching 11. So we'll lay 4.5. Just to be fair, that's the best line I'm seeing at present. But I got to think that'll close a little bit higher anyway on Memphis. So we'll lay 4.5 with Memphis over the Sacramento Kings in Thursday night action. What else are you looking at here, Chris, for the rest of your
I'm looking at – hold your nose here, Ben, but I'm looking at the Toronto Raptors plus 8.5 hosting the OKC Thunder, and it's only because of the spot. The Raptors have covered in 7 of their last 9 games. They continue to cover. And what the Raptors do the basics right. They're number 1 in fast break points per game in the NBA. They're number 2 in paint points in the game, and they're a good 2-point shooting team. Do they still shoot too many threes? Yes, but when they don't, and they get a little humbled in that area, especially after a game where they shoot like 50 threes and they only hit like 32%, which is happening a little too often. When they humble themselves and focus on their 2-point shooting and move around the ball, it's a pretty good basketball team, and they do a lot of the work, like the effort things right. They're one of the top teams in offensive rebounding as well. They're catching teams now, and they've strung together a few wins. OKC, they're coming off 5 of their last 7 games have been on the road. They were just at home. Now they got to travel across the country up through Canada, and this is kind of a sandwich spot. I mean, they have the Pelicans in their next game. They're at the Pelicans on Saturday. How much do they care about the Pelicans? Okay, conference team. I don't know. The Pelicans aren't doing very much right now, but they are going to get a little healthier in that one. So maybe they start thinking about it. 8.5. The Raptors just keep covering. OKC is a great team, but I like this Toronto team, man. I like Darko. I think the defense is going to improve. So taking a little risk here for me, because OKC is a great team, and I have them as a top 5 power rated team. I think if you don't at this point, then you're mistaken. But the Raptors, man, this is a good spot for them, staying at home, and I'm shooting for it, man. If I knew if I saw anything over a 7, I have to take it.
Yep. And we're seeing 8.5 on the opener. So we will catch 8.5 here with Toronto. And isn't it a great example too of just the depth, the parity of the league now compared to even say a decade ago, where a team like Toronto, the talent level, if you kind of insert them one of these bottom 5 Eastern Conference teams, they'd be a double-digit dog in this spot. They'd be getting bet against every single night. But not only is the talent pool so much better now, or even these quote-unquote poor teams still have the guys. They've got the ability to hang in there with an elite team like the Thunder. But they're also playing hard. I mean, they really make you earn it. Even these teams, with the exception of like Washington, who's probably the one team that has just been a doormat against all of these contenders who've had their way so far with the Wizards. It's very, very rare, though, that you see a team just totally lay an egg from an effort perspective, especially when it is one of the top teams in the league. So I respect that angle. And, I mean, you've been very pro on OKC, too. You've been hot. You laid it with the Thunder last week over the Warriors. So that's always telling to me when there's respected bettors out there like you, Chris, that are obviously high and for good reason on certain teams, and then go against them in specific spots like this. See if we can get home with that spot, too, on the Raptors.
Yeah, and every week we've taken a bet like this that might be considered gross or so, but it's really not. I mean, the Raptors, like you said, I mean, they're playing well, they're fighting hard. I said a few stats there that kind of prove that they're a try-hard team. And for our audience, hey, you're probably going to get a better spread here. I mean, I'm seeing 7.5. I saw 8.5 at Bet Online, but it's conceivable that this jumps up even more. OKC is a very good team; they get a lot of respect from the marketplace. Sure. So hopefully, by the time this comes out and you guys are listening, you get like a 9.5. That'd be awesome.
Hey, we would love that. More points, the merrier for especially when you're trying to go against a team like the Thunder. The other game, I was really hoping, and watching the games last night, how it was playing out. I'm like, man, I'm going to be all over Houston over Golden State. That's the other marquee matchup here as we close out. I guess we already close out best bets because I don't have a best bet on this game, Chris. There's no lineup, and that is largely because of injuries that happened late. Rockets lose their star Jalen Green. He's day-to-day, took a shot to the eye. No idea if he'll be able to go against Golden State. I was prepared, though, to really be on this Houston team who've been playing at such a high level defensively. They're top 4 for the season. They have been the single best defensive rating team over the last 10 games, taking on a Golden State team that has really fallen on hard times from an offensive standpoint, especially after losing DeAnthony Melton with a torn ACL. Buddy Hield shooting numbers going way down. Now Draymond Green is day-to-day. He's got a calf injury, MRI coming up later today. And this is also a great in-season revenge angle because Golden State went to Houston, beat the Rockets in overtime a month ago. I was totally prepared to be all in on Houston, but when you lose your star and he's questionable at best, I just can't go there, and we don't even have a line out yet for this game, Chris. So unfortunately, as we sometimes often see in the NBA where injuries take such a big focal point and have such a big impact, I'm going to have to sit this one out, at least as far as when we're recording right now.
Yeah, this is a really tough one, too, because at the beginning of every season, I try to find teams that I believe, based on what I'm seeing, maybe based on some data, but it's kind of hard to see in the data, teams that will surprise other teams, that it's hard to prepare for other teams. And I think that's what we saw a little bit from Houston in matchup 1 against the Warriors, this new iteration of who the Golden State Warriors are and how deep of a rotation they can play. But now that they've seen them once, it went to OT, it was a tough fought game. I would have liked to be on Houston too, but yet, now no Jalen Green. Both teams are sort of going through a little bit of turmoil now, or I guess, maybe just recently now for Houston because of Jalen Green. So I probably won't have a bet on this one. And if anything, the value might be on Golden State as Houston continues on this road trip. I mean, their next road game is on Sunday, but it kind of just keeps going here. So it's not a great spot for the Rockets. And they do have a rematch, or the third game is going to be next Wednesday at Houston after that road trip. So
and it's in the cup,
and it's a cup, right? It's a cup game. So
big cup game, Chris. You've been handicapping the NBA forever now. Now you get to be introduced to the in-season tournament that we all love.
Yeah, the cup game. But yeah, so this is kind of like a sandwich spot for their series. So there's a lot of things that are conflicting for me about this game. And I agree with you. Look ahead, was hoping that Houston would get a great spread in this one, like a 3 or something. And that would have been a really tasty number for me, but probably staying away.
Happy to sit back and watch how this one unfolds. For more of all of Chris's breakdowns, check out his work, sportmoney.com, also at Farley Bets. He's got his handle there on the screen. And what we love to do to close the show each and every week, Chris, take a look at some of the look-ahead situational weekend spots. Just, mark these down, keep them on a little note tab and see what happens. Sometimes these situations do manifest really well. Other times they don't. But in the times that they do, we have found, you found, Chris, you've had really good success looking at these situational angles coming up for the weekend.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The Spurs are a team that I'm looking at from a negative angle just because they have a pretty tough travel situation here. They are playing on Thursday night at home, but then they go they stay at home against the Kings. But I think the Bulls are just a weird, it's a weird team. It's a weird spot. It's a game that they could play down for. I really like San Antonio. I like that they're already blossoming with Victor Wembanyama. Greg Popovich, tough coach not to enjoy, just from his personality. But this is a situation against Chicago where I'm not going to take San Antonio when they have a game coming up against the Kings where, are the Kings in their division? I believe so. I've never, Ben, quick side note here.
I'm Southwest Division, Chris?
Yeah, I've been an expert at NFL division since I was 5. But I can't figure in NBA divisions. I'm I don't care about NBA. Are there divisional rivalries? And I guess there are. But anyway, these two teams saw each other twice already. The Spurs have beat the Kings twice, so I think that you could expect a angry and motivated Kings team on Friday night. So I don't like the Spurs on Thursday. Golden State also with a pretty tough spot. And a reason to maybe fade them on Thursday, because then on Friday they host the Timberwolves, and the Timberwolves are also trying to wrangle themselves up, right, and get back to who they are. So the Timberwolves are not going to lay down in that one either. And lastly, there was one more team that has a tough spot in this one. Ben, let's see if I can find it before
I was going to say, as you looked it up, Sacramento in the Pacific Division, for what that's worth. And,
okay,
San Antonio in the Southwest. But they all just. If you just Google NBA standings, you're not even going to see the breakdown by division. That's just how little. The only thing it really matters for is honestly division betting, which you can sometimes find good angles on. Like Cleveland was about 2-1 to win the Central Division preseason. They are now big favorites, as one example.
Yes, well, thank you. And that's why Ben is such a great host, because there are some things where my mind is just, I don't know where I'm going.
I'm a pro at filibustering. While
you are a pro filibuster. Another reason to stay away from the Spurs and Bulls game is the Bulls have a back-to-back. The Bulls are on the road on Thursday, and then they go back home against the Pacers. Again, conceivably a team that they probably care much more about beating. And again, the Bulls are a team that I typically stay away from. They've been playing better overall. But I don't like that spot for the Bulls either. And I might even look at Indiana. Indiana hasn't been as good on the road. They're a much better home team. But eventually, the Pacers have to find some sort of semblance of the consistency. They have a lot of talent on that team. So I'm hoping that's a spot to bet on the Pacers. Let's see how the Bulls look on Thursday night. But I would avoid the Spurs Bulls, and I would take a look at at Golden State, at least, maybe fading them on Friday night against Minnesota.
Kind of shocking that it's been this bad so far for Indiana, with a coach as well-respected as Rick Carlisle, with a roster that's pretty much the same as last year, and yet they just have not found their footing whatsoever. So those are our situational spots for the weekend still to come as we recap our best bets. Again, doing pretty well. This is our 8th show of the season. We're 17-6 here to get things started as we turn the calendar into December. Hope to keep it rolling into the final month of the year. We have a joint best bet. We are both on the Grizzlies -4.5 over the Kings. Chris taking the Raptors +8.5 over the Thunder as we wrap things up. A big thanks as well to our new producer, Sam Hart. If anything goes wrong, Chris, we can just blame Sam because we're 0-0 under his watch. So we have an out now. Sam does a great job, though, as always. So I just wanted to say, and we know we can lay that out from the whole betting philosophy. And next week's going to be a really fun week because I think when we'll come on the air, we'll know the semifinals for the NBA Cup, which will be next Saturday, and that's the only games that will be on that day. As a result, for the teams who didn't make the NBA Cup, I think every single team is in action on Friday night next week, Chris, and we'll have a good amount of rest as well. So we should have a really, really good card for next week. I'm pumped for that show as well as we already start looking forward.
Love it, man. Was I blacking out last season, or was the NBA tournament called the in-season tournament? It was not called the Cup, was it?
It was not the Emirates Cup. You should get your proper branding there, Chris.
That's right.
No, it was not. It was in-season tournament. I went to the semifinals last year in Vegas, and where the Bucks completely crapped the bed against the Indiana Pacers, and it was a really weird experience. I'm curious to see what sort of tweaks they've made, because year one, I mean, the first game tipped at like 2 p.m. Pacific on a Tuesday. It was really, really weird, and the arena was maybe half full. So I don't know.
And Ben, I can't help but notice 2 weeks now we haven't really talked about your Bucks, and they're humming.
Out of sight, out of mind, Chris. Let's just they're on a roll. They're starting to figure it out.
Just knock on wood a little bit. Maybe that's the key. The key is they don't want to hear about your thoughts on them. Okay, leave the Bucks alone, Ben. They're doing just fine. And Chris Middleton is coming back now too. So arrows are pointing up for Milwaukee finally.
Thank you for encouraging me to continue not mentioning the Bucks, because I went on my big Bucks rant at the start of the year when they were awful. Clearly, those shockwaves were heard back in my hometown of Milwaukee, and they've turned the corner. Top 5 seed now in the East, and they're in the they are in the Emirates NBA Cup. So
maybe you should talk about it more then. Maybe you're right. There you go.
I have a feeling, because just looking at the matchups, the quarterfinals are set as we wrap up the show here. Magic Bucks. That is an awesome game on Tuesday.
Great game.
But Magic have been a different team away from home this year. Hawks at Knicks. I mean, a Bucks Knicks Emirates NBA Cup semifinal would be a really, really fun matchup. Then you get Mavericks Thunder, Warriors Rockets on the other side. So it is really a dream scenario here for the NBA with the final teams that made the quarterfinals. Those are on Tuesday and Wednesday next week. We usually record mid to late week, so we will know the matchups for Saturday's semifinals we record next week. So that'll do it for us. Thanks, as always, for tuning in. We hope you have a tremendous amount of success with bets the rest of the week. As for Chris Farley, I'm Ben Wilson, as well as for our producer, Sam Hart. We say so long, and we'll catch you next time here on our NBA show from Clubhouse TV.